Welcome everyone to this webinar, which is on our teaching case about the COVID-19 impact on global supply chains. So which is really going to be about supply chain risk. I'm joined by Corine van der Slot, my colleague from InChange. She's the head of education activities here at InChange. And my name is Noah Schaul. We both work for InChange, the company that is setting up this webinar, and it's also taking the initiative for this teaching case. And yeah, we're really happy to welcome you all here and to dive a bit into this teaching case and answer your questions. So also feel free during the webinar to ask your questions in the chat, please, so that we keep it organized. We will then either get back to the questions during the webinar or afterwards during the question and answers. We'll take about 40 minutes or something for the webinar, and then we'll have quite some time to answer your questions. Yeah, let us start with the program for today. Can you all see the second slide? Yeah, yep. Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, so yes. We will start with some insights into why we created this teaching case, to give you an idea of that, and then do a quick round introduction of all the participants. We will not go through everyone, also only those who want to share some insights. I think it's always nice. We've done so in the beginning a little bit to see who else is in this call. You know, we all have this common denominator of being interested in this issue, in this topic. So I think it's nice to know who else is in the webinar. Then we'll dive into the teaching case itself and see also the different ways how it can be used in a course. Share some tips and tricks on delivering courses online in general, but also related to this teaching case more specifically. And then end in the end with with question and answers. And also maybe if you want, we think it's always nice if we have a group of professors together from the same field to share some best practices between each other. So that's a program, and we will start with the situation that we are in right now. So the impact of COVID-19, of course, was affecting supply chain professionals all around the world and their training, but also, of course, education of young talent at universities and all kind of institutions worldwide. So schools were shutting down, classes had to move online, and it was really a challenge for many professors to keep students on track. And we have a big network of professors that we work with, and a lot of people came to us and said, you know, our biggest challenge right now is the question, how do we keep students engaged and motivated online? So that's a bit the situation and the background from which this teaching case arose. So the idea of Edwenk and Michiel Steeman, who created this teaching case, was looking at the current situation. It's really a challenge for supply chains worldwide, and supply chain managers all around the globe were facing this same question of, you know, this happened, and what do we do now? What do we do? What now? And this is of course a big challenge for many people. But it's also, in terms of education, it's a really fascinating case for students to look at. And the idea that Michiel Steeman at Edwenk had in mind when creating this case was to put students into this exact situation of a global supply chain manager asking, what do we do now? So that's the beginning of this teaching case, how it was initialized, and then they actually went to action and created it and shared it with professors worldwide, basically. Before diving into the teaching case itself, we had a quick round of introduction in the beginning, but a question we are also interested in is what experience you already have with using teaching cases. We are quite a small group today, so I think it should be doable to have a couple of us share some experiences in terms of if they have already used teaching cases, and maybe briefly elaborating on which type of those and how that went. So let's open the microphones. If someone wants to speak, feel free. Otherwise, also in the comment section, it's also fine. So I will briefly leave the floor to you.
I'll start then. My name is Corine van der Slot, and like Noah, I'm working at InChange, and I'm like Noah said, head of the education department, so responsible for the global education markets at InChange. And for 4 years now, so I have a lot of experience with courses, educators, and etc. So happy that you're here. So maybe Pete, maybe you can introduce yourself first.
All right. I'm Piet Wallis. I'm lecturer of all supply chain courses in the Professional University of Ghent. So we use TFC. Until now, we only used Fresh Connection. We're also considering eventually maybe the Blue Connection and the Cool Connection. But for the moment, we are most satisfied, let's say most accustomed with the Fresh Connection. And so, as the introduction already said, suddenly our students came back out of internship. And so now, in order to make sure that they get their certificate, we have to make a sort of replacement internship. And so that's why we thought, okay, a variant on the Fresh Connection they already know would be a good idea to get them working. Yeah.
No, then it might really be an idea to give this business case to them as an assignment. Pete, you could consider that. Yeah.
Yes, that's how we consider it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm Adekunle Oke from Robert Gordon University in Aberdeen. I'm a lecturer in operations management and I teach supply chain management as well. We've not been using in change anyway, but I'm still exploring how to incorporate it into our teaching for our students to have the best learning experience. So I hope I will gain some of insight in this webinar today and see how we can incorporate that into our teaching curriculum.
Excellent.
Well, I am Igor Lopez from Technological University of Havana. I'm industrial engineer, and my department is the responsible for supply chain and logistics. And we use teaching case usually before TFC, but no based on simulation or something more real cases. But now, from September, I changed completely my logistics subjects because TFC is more. I'm using TFC as the basic case study for teaching logistics. From TFC, I'm teaching service level, shelf life, lead times, everything logistic, but not using only TFC as a tool, but TFC as a center for that. In this case of COVID, I'm sharing with my students. I want to know how to use better this case. That's why I'm here.
Excellent. Yeah. So Tiger, maybe short introduction.
Yeah. Okay. My name is Tiger Chow. I'm from China. I'm not the lecturer or professor. My background is the supply chain management head in China for American company. I have the supply chain management team in China to manage their supply chain activities, including sourcing, purchasing, and tooling, engineering, and their development across Asia. I led my team just went through the whole outbreak from April to March. My academic background is I'm the doctorate candidate in University of Manchester, focusing on the learning, individual learning experience to their group knowledge and eventually to the capability of the organization. So the purpose for me to attend this webinar is actually I'm very curious with risk management because this is one part of my job. So I try to develop this skill in the last few years, and I would very curious to see how this case goes, because I also have my team to write a memo of their feeling in the last 3 months. This is a very interesting topic for me, not just from a practice standpoint.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Hartanto?
Yes, my name is Hartanto Wong. I work as associate professor at Aarhus University in Denmark. I am involved in teaching supply chain design and management course for our master's program in logistics supply chain management. So here at Aarhus University, every year I use several cases. Normally I select a set of cases from Harvard or from the case org. And today, the topic that you are going to present here interests me, because one of the topics covered in that course is about supply chain risk management, where I think I'm looking forward to listening further your presentations. So that's my introduction. Thank you.
Excellent. And Jackie is also here, huh? Jackie, maybe you can say something? Jackie's also a colleague of ours, so I think she may not be available at the moment. So you better continue then, I think, Noah?
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, thanks everyone for these insights. It was also a bit useful for us to see how experienced you are already with the concept of teaching cases. I heard some of you, like Igor, for example, saying that they're already using it. But still, I want to just very briefly look into this concept, which is usually a situation where you throw students into a case where they are then the main character of the story. So it's a bit of storytelling as well. And then they get a scenario, and then you ask them, what do you do now? That's the idea, that's the concept. And then there's two options that you have for these teaching cases. There's the descriptive case, which is usually a real scenario that happened in the past, so more like an anecdote, where you have a situation, a problem, and then you have the answer, which is usually what they did, so how they solved this problem, which is pretty descriptive, and it's also really interesting. But what we choose is the open case, because we think it's a lot more exciting to ask students for their interpretation of the solution. And so we give them a scenario, and then we ask them, what would you do, but as an open question. So we say there's no really right or wrong, but we say whatever you reason and whatever solution you come up with, you have to argue properly and have sound arguments behind that solution. So this is why the assignment questions are also separate in this teaching case, because it leaves it up to the teacher to formulate their own questions and use the case to form their own course. And to create this case, we of course needed a company to build it on. And in this situation, the company we are using, some of you might know it. I mean, we've realized that quite a few of you know it already. It's a juice manufacturer, and it's called the Fresh Connection. And those of you who know the Fresh Connection know that it has a supplier from China. And in this key teaching case, this supplier might run out of supply. And I'm saying most of you know the Fresh Connection, not because it's a real company that is well known, but because the Fresh Connection is well known as the leading supply chain management simulation game. And this enables us to build our case on a company, which, yes, is virtual, but it gives us full insights into the company. And these insights, this data and the scenarios is all based on real life data and on real life companies. So the Fresh Connection is built on a real life juice manufacturer, actually. And that's really exciting, because in most cases where you have, in most teaching cases, you are looking at companies and you do not have every detail of the company. You don't have these insights. But since we are kind of looking at a virtual company, we have really a whole amount of data in terms of their products, their supply chain, the reports of every aspect of the company. So that's really exciting, and you can thereby really change the degree of difficulty and the degree of detail you want to go in. You can really dive into the simulation that way. And just for those of you who don't know the Fresh Connection, it's really a game that is used by universities worldwide. And since it's so fundamental to this case, I think it's nice to give a brief introduction to the simulation. So in a nutshell, the Fresh Connection is played in teams. So each student gets one management role. So supply chain, purchasing, operations, and sales. And then these 4 students have to manage the company together by really organizing the supply chain and managing the supply chain. So they start with a company in quite bad shape. The supply chain is not really working well. And then by taking the right strategic and tactical decisions, they have to bring the company back on track. That's their quest. And round by round, they can take decisions again. And after each round, they see the impact of those decisions on the company in terms of how the decisions impacted the supply chain, also the financial situation, and so on. So they go through different rounds of feedback loops. That's a bit the idea of the Fresh Connection, for those of you who don't know it yet. And in this case, we are using the Fresh Connection as well, but not in a way where you can go round by round and take decisions and see what the result is. So not in an interactive way, but in a watch role way. So that's we call it watch role because the students and also the professor have full access to the situation. They can look into every report, into every into all the data. They can explore the company and analyze the situation, but they cannot take decisions in the simulation. So in this case, we basically do the exercise that many professors who use the simulation as an interactive course, so that those professors do after the gameplay. And that's the exercise of analyzing situations. So usually the simulation is used in a way where students play a few rounds, and then after the gameplay, they look at, okay, what situation are we in now? And then they go from there. So you start basically at that point. And another difference is that students, when they do the gameplay, they start with a company in financial troubles, with a bad supply chain. But in this case, for the teaching case, to kind of make it more approachable, we decided to make students start from a situation where they have a supply chain and a financially positive company and a supply chain that is working. So they start with a company in good shape, and then the exercise starts with mapping the status quo, so mapping the supply chain as it is. If this difference between the interactive course of the Fresh Connection and the watch role that you have in this teaching case is not entirely clear, feel free to mention that in the comments or reach out to Corinne or me after the call, after the webinar. We're happy to answer your questions, and also every other question that you have during this webinar, feel free to raise it in the chat, and we will get back to it at the end of the call. Now let us briefly look at the 4 blocks that this teaching case consists of. I think it's quite nice to have this overview, to know that it consists of 4 blocks, because then you can also consider to only use part of the teaching case, so only use block 1 and 4, or only use block 1 and 2, whatever you prefer in your course. So that's completely open to you. The teaching case is designed in a way that professors have the freedom to introduce and implement this teaching case in their course in the way they want. They see it working the best way. So the 4 blocks that we have is block 1 is the situation we are in. So the supply chain of the Fresh Connection, analyzing that one. The second block is short-term supply issues and risks. Third block is short-term demand issues and risks and changes. And the 4th block is about medium to long-term risk, and that's really taking the management approach. So that's the 4 blocks that this teaching case consists of. And if the questions are too open, so we have also designed some assignment questions for this teaching case. And if you think these questions are too open for your target group of students, then you can define more detailed questions to help students go through the analysis with more ease. And also how much time you spend on each of these blocks, and really depends on the level of detail and the level of complexity you want to go. So if you're, for example, only interested in the short term, you can really just say, I want to look at block 2 only, or block 3 only, and say, ask the students, look, there is panic, what do we do now? But you can go ahead and have a 90 minutes class or course discussion with this easily. So it's really customizable to your needs. And now we will go into each of these blocks and look at the scenario of this block, and also the learning outcomes that we are aiming for with each of these blocks. So the first one is about mapping the supply chain. So we look at the Fresh Connection supply chain and we analyze it. On the left-hand side, you see a picture of the flow chart, which is a very nice tool to visualize the supply chain. And on the right-hand side, we see an example of how students could potentially map this flow chart more in detail and say, look, this is how the supply chain is structured. This is how this company is operating. And in terms of learning objectives, this exercise has its main objective to practice the technique of supply chain mapping, which can be nicely done with a flowchart, as I said. And the objective is really to see the dimensions and potential issues in the starting situation. So having a good critical look at it, and then learn and practice how to deal with a new and unknown company situation based on a large amount of data from a company database. So students are really being thrown into this environment of the Fresh Connection with a lot of access to a lot of data, and then they have to look at this and try to map this data into a supply chain and say this is the situation as it is. The second block is then really the first scenario. So that's the CEO of the company writing you as a student. The student is in this case the supply chain manager. And supply chain manager gets a message, a WhatsApp message from the CEO saying, look, COVID-19 broke out, and now it's actually impacting suppliers and our suppliers. And why is this so? Because we have one supplier from China who is supplying our vitamin C, which we need for our product, and China just closed their borders. So this is a big problem for our supply chain, and also other suppliers are at risk, as is visualized on the left-hand side picture. And the learning objective of this block is for students to understand the potential impact of sudden short-term supply risks and develop potential mitigations against these risks. The third block is really about demand. So you have, again, the students with the supply chain manager received a message from the CEO saying we have sudden increases in demand, and our customers, so this is from the sales side, they are increasing their orders. So this is really about the bullwhip effect. It's not specifically mentioned in the message, but it says, and keep in mind that what goes up always must come down. So the real problem hasn't manifested itself yet. But the learning objective is really to understand the potential impact of sudden short-term changes in demand and the underlying uncertainty linked to this. So the uncertainty about these demand changes in terms of the size of fluctuations in demand, but also the uncertainty about the duration of the changes in demand. And this is ultimately it could impact supply. So that's the risk they have to assess in some way. And the fourth block is more about the medium to long-term plan. So it's not really, so the CEO is approaching you and saying, I know the situation, we have to come up with solutions for the short term, but this problem has been created because of something, and we don't want this to happen again in the future. So it's really an end-to-end risk assessment and mitigation plan. So it's no longer only connected to the COVID-19 outbreak, but it's completely looking at all of the risks that the company is facing. So the learning outcome is really to think about the medium to long-term risks and develop a broader perspective on those. At the bottom, you see some of the templates that students can use to solve this exercise, basically, and to map the risks. Say how strong are these risks, so how do you say, to rank them also in terms of degree of likeliness and impact, and then to come up with a plan on how to mitigate them. And on the right hand side, you see the message from the CEO. Now, based on this teaching case, we have some general teaching recommendations. I mean, most of you know best how and if to implement this teaching case in your course, but we still have made up a list of courses and departments that we see this teaching case the most useful in. Maybe also just to trigger yourself to look and think, or maybe I know a colleague who is working in one of these courses, and then you could of course share this teaching case with them, because it's of course free access. So we were thinking of specialized operations and supply chain management programs, of more general programs about more business-oriented ones, with like economics and business administration, but also courses about strategy, operations and supply chain management, very specialized on risk. Also, of course, that's the ideal course to use this with, because it's really about risk assessment and risk management. Those courses are usually assessments. Those courses are usually electives. And then also risk management workshops or seminars. But in general, this case can be taken in different directions, such as also project management. You could ask your students, look, your boss wants a project and expects a response. What do you tell him? That's also an approach you can take. And given the depth of information you have in the Fresh Connection, and the degree of difficulty and complexity you can dive in, we think that this teaching case can be really customized to the target audience of students. So you can stay more at the surface and use it with bachelor students, but you can also go a bit deeper and use it with postgraduate or even executive education students, such as MBA or EMBA. So we think that it's fit for all kind of students, depending on how you structure the course and how you use the teaching case. Also, a small insight into how you can access the Fresh Connection and the teaching case. So you have received the email with your teacher code. Make sure that you don't share the teacher code with your students, because then they get access to the teacher materials. So if you can of course find all this information in the teaching case itself, also in the teaching note. So you can find what you call it. So you can find guidelines to access the material in the teaching case. That's of course the material for students. So you can send students to our portal, my.inchange.com, where they can create an account like on every other website, and then log in with their created email and password. And then once they are inside our portal, they receive the code from you, which is risk ST case. They put it in there, and then the window at the top right, bottom right appears, the Fresh Connection teaching case risk student, and there they get access to the teaching case. For you, using the teacher code that we send you, you can do the same procedure and then enter the code that you received, and then you get access to the assignment questions, to the teaching notes, and to the case itself. But these guidelines are, as I said, also in the annex of the teaching case and the teaching notes. So you can look at them there. And if you still have questions, you can, of course, reach out to Corinne or me. Given the situation, we also have some insights into how to use a teaching case in an online setting. Since the Fresh Connection is a web-based learning tool that makes it very easy to use this teaching case online, we even have professors all over the world who are using the Fresh Connection in physical courses, and they now could easily switch to an online setting, because the Fresh Connection is completely web-based. So that's completely doable. Also, everything will be made available through our portal. So you or your students just have to log in, and then they get access to teaching case, the simulation, and materials. So they have everything in one place. Also keep in mind students are preferably provided with comprehensive content that they can review independently without further explanation and at their own pace. And if they need support, that they can access support for further questions. So maybe set up a chat with your students next to your email so that they can easily reach you. An alternative, of course, always to have a remote introduction and then introduce the students to a specific topic, so to a specific block, for example, of this teaching case, then ask them the respective question, the assignment question, and split them up into virtual breakout rooms. We just heard from a professor in the previous webinar that they are doing this themselves and that it works really well. Breakout rooms can be used with tools such as Zoom. For those who don't know Zoom, Zoom is a webinar tool that is freely available. And then, so split up your students in teams, they split up in breakout rooms, and then they can solve the question. And then in the end, you have a group discussion online or in a forum where you can then ask your students to present, for example, their findings. That's one way to go. Speaking about discussions, we've seen that, or we've heard from many of the professors that we work with, that organizing discussions is very difficult. So in an online setting. So we believe that you have 4 options to structure group discussions, and I want to just give some insights into these 4 options. So one of them is a discussion forum. I think that's a very nice one. Many universities provide on their learning platforms such discussion forums that you can use. So that's quite nice. It's not real time, but it therefore provides time to react to you and to your students. So you could, for example, use a discussion forum to post assignment question 1 and then let them react and discuss between each other. And then you as a professor, you log into the discussion once or twice a day, and you can steer the discussion into the direction that you want it to go. I think that's a very nice tool to use in these times. With small groups, a regular webinar setting, of course, should be possible, like we are doing here as well. If you have bigger groups, again, breakout rooms is very nice. We think it's a lot better than the raising hand tool because that's, in our opinion, quite inefficient. And then, after the breakout rooms, you can, for example, ask one team to present their findings and then have another team react to these findings. So that's a way to go, for example. Another solution is, of course, to give an assignment to your students, give an upload deadline, and then you look at their input. You write down feedback, and then you set up a session with them online. So that's kind of the format of an online debrief, which is kind of taking the format of what I found is interesting in this insight from team 1 is X, Y, and then you can really make use this way of asynchronous ways of working. Some further general teaching recommendations, also in regard to this teaching case more specifically, is that you can do it remotely and in class. So at the moment, of course, only remotely, but the teaching case is also very nice to use in class. You can ask the students to work as individuals, but I think it's also very nice to split them up in teams and let them work on the case in a team. You can do it as one session. So say we do block 1 today and that's it. But you can also say, we spread it out over a sequence of shorter sessions. So like you could use 1 week with 3 or 4 sessions. You can use, you can spread it out over multiple weeks. So that's very easy to customize for a teaching case. Same with the assignment questions. You can really give them the whole teaching case all at once, or you say, I want to work really with the scenario. So today they received the first part of the story with the first assignment question, and then at the end of the week or next week they received the second question with the second part of the story, something like that. We spoke about debriefs and discussions. So really try to make use of synchronous and asynchronous ways of working to make it as easy as possible for your students to work in an online setting. As I said, the situation or the the concept we are using for this teaching case is a watch-only concept. So your students have access to the Fresh Connection, but they cannot play. But there's also I mean, most of you know the Fresh Connection already, but for those of you who don't know it yet, different ways you can use the Fresh Connection also in an interactive setup. And I want to just give you some insights into what is possible there on this slide. So I want to clearly differentiate. So there's a teaching case where you use the simulation as a database, basically, like as a to look at data and at a supply chain and map that one. But you cannot take decisions. It's not interactive in that way. The teaching case makes interactive, but what the Fresh Connection in itself can do as well is really an interactive course where students go round by round, as I described in the beginning. And that's quite nice because it creates an engaging online experience for students in the current times. And just to give you some ideas on possibilities there, so we have designed full courses with the Fresh Connection, also with different topics. And on the standard topic of the Fresh Connection, we have created a ready-to-go online course. So that makes it really easy for you. So even for professors who have not used it yet, we had some professors who approached us saying, hey, we have a course that was cancelled, a bit like Pete was mentioning, an internship that was cancelled. And then they have to quickly find a replacement for this. And there we made it for professors as easy as possible to just, start today, send email to the students tomorrow. So it's really ready to go and kind of hands off for the teacher. There's also a complementary book with the Fresh Connection that is also has now been translated to Dutch. And we are really happy that we have an online trained teacher, which makes it, especially in the current situation, very easy for professors to onboard with the Fresh Connection and do so in their own time and pace. And this is now really in a nutshell, giving you just some ideas what the Fresh Connection offers. If you have any questions regarding this, feel free to raise them in the end in the chat or reach out to Corinne or me to discuss them. Because I can only, I don't want to dive too much into the Fresh Connection itself.
There was a question, Noah. There was a question from Igor. Will the PowerPoint be available for us? And yes, that is of course available. We can share the PowerPoint.
Yeah. Thanks, Igor, for the question. Yeah, good point.
Yeah, thanks.
Then some tips on online delivery in general. We have created this slide already a while back when the whole situation started developing in this direction with our education associates. Those are experts in the field of teaching and also in supply chain management. And they are working at different universities. So we have collected some of those insights. And the first one I really like because it's, you can say, students have a hard time now to go online. And that's really an issue. But you can also say the question of how do I effectively work remote as an individual, as part of a group, and as part of a process? That in itself should become one of the learning outcomes, because what students learn here is actually a soft skill that will be needed more and more in the future. So you can also turn it around and see it from that perspective. Then you try to hand out materials to your students ahead of time so that they can work on it when instructed to, so that they can work in their own time and space, and be aware that working online is more inefficient than working at a physical location together. As mentioned before, combine synchronous and asynchronous teaching and learning methods, and try to keep synchronous sessions, so sessions where you are with your students together online, limited to around 25 minutes. And if they are longer, then spread them out, spread out small batches of these sessions over a day. Create discussion forums, we touched upon that. Make communication with students as easy as possible, so such as using live chats. Just a WhatsApp chat can already help a lot, where students have more ease to approach you or approach their colleagues, their peers, because sometimes students can answer questions to each other. Have online breakout groups. I mentioned Zoom, so that's a nice tool to do this. And also there's other tools such as Kahoot, which is very nice to make your webinars more interactive in times of online teaching, even in times of offline teaching, really. But Kahoot is a very nice example of how you can basically customize your own quiz, your own questions, and the students have to answer them live in competition with the other students, getting a score after each question. So that's a really nice tool to create interaction and engagement. So yeah, these are just a few tips from our education associates. Regarding virtual teams, we discussed that this teaching case can be used with students individually, but also splitting them up in teams. So this can also really be an opportunity for students to really experience working in virtual teams under time pressure, which is, as I said, a skill that they will need in the future more and more. And then after the experience, so after the exercise, you can add as an additional point, you can say, look, now you have experienced this. Now you can reflect as a team on the experience you made. For example, based on the Belbin rules, there's other teamwork theories there, but this is just one example. And before going to the question and answers and also sharing some best practices, we would like to just provide some technical tips as well, such as using Microsoft Teams or Zoom. I mean, those are just two examples, but we have made quite good experience with those two for the delivery of kickoffs or debriefs to students, because they are easy to install and to register for your students. Also, Microsoft Teams, you don't need a subscription of Microsoft for those. It's freely available. So those two we can recommend. With larger groups, it's usually best to keep microphones muted, to keep the online session organized. And you can, like we did here, encourage participants to leave their questions and comments in the chat section. We also strongly recommend to record live sessions and share the recording afterwards with students. That's just, let me give you one example. Many universities where students come from all across the world, many students now had to go back home, and there's of course the issue of time zones. So if you don't record your online sessions, then it might make it difficult for all the students to join the session, and they might miss your content. So recording the session is really highly recommended to make it as easy as possible for the students to engage. Other examples of tools that universities use to share content or facilitate webinars are Adobe Connect, Moodle, Canvas, Full Fabric, or Blackboard, but there's many more. And it's also time to become creative as an educator and look at different tools and say, how can I, adapt to the situation, but maybe even find tools that I can use in the future also in an online or offline setting. And with this, I want to finish the regular webinar and move to the question and answers. So feel free to put them into the chat or open your mic and speak up. We're not so many people, so that should be no problem. And feel free to also share your experiences that you have made recently that you think could be of value to other professors here in the webinar. I think it's also time to collaborate and share what we've learned from this experience together, and how we can move forward in the best way. So already thank you here from my side. I will now also, Corinne has also some personal insights because she has a lot of experience with working with professors at universities. So yeah, I will hand the floor to Corinne and everyone in the webinar.
Okay, so if are there any questions on this, yeah, maybe questions that you have now that maybe information that we didn't share that you would like to know?
Yes, thank you very much for the explanation of the didactics. So that will help me indeed to build my case internally. But now for the COVID case, how do I have to understand? The students have a watch role, but so does it mean that there are 4 rounds, as you explained, and each round is 1 block, or how do I have to see the watch role exactly, Noah? Yeah.
Yeah. Or shall I answer it?
Yes.
Well, you should separate this business case from the regular supply of fresh connection gameplay, where we do 6 rounds
Yes.
of gameplay, and then of course we also have teaching materials on the COVID outbreak on that. So if you want to play the fresh connection, for instance, you know it, Peter, the fresh connection, we have a variant called risk management. And what we've done, we've created new teaching materials that go with that variant. And those teaching materials are called the COVID-19 risk management teaching materials. And they specifically are related to the COVID-19 outbreak. But then with that package, you can really play the fresh connection. So you can really do gameplay, have the students improve the return on investment and things. The teaching case we're showcasing, or what we are presenting to you now, is a free of charge teaching case that we offer you. So there's no cost attached to it. You can just use it. You can totally adjust it to your own situation. And what we give you in this is also access for the students to the fresh connection, but they only have a watch function. So the objective of this teaching case is not to improve the return on investment. It is more like to make an analysis of a situation as it is. So they can extract information from the fresh connection. So where they are, they have the situation of the period of the last 6 months. As you also know that, and they can try around. They can change the service level. They can see what it does to the price, for instance. But there's no calculation. The round is not calculated.
Okay. Yeah,
so that's 2 different things.
That's the mapping. Yeah, indeed.
Yeah, and that's the mapping. Yeah, the mapping, and it's and it's about the short-term supply risk. Yeah, everything that Noah just mentioned. And because it's for free, it's only a watch function in the fresh connection, which is also very useful because you can just extract all the information from the fresh connection. But if you really want to play with the students, what you are used to, then it's the active.
Okay, no, I understand. But it just, as you said, okay, the mapping, and then if they say, okay, now I want to see, because I thought the mapping was the normal situation, and then they can see, okay, now suddenly we have a supply shock, we have a demand shock. So is that somehow how I just want to understand, is it then another round, or is it another view, or what? How do you give them the access to that data?
That is a different that's this is kind of the static teaching case what we're discussing here, and what you would like to see is the COVID-19 risk management version, where it is interactive, where you do play rounds, where you do have to deal with disruptions, and not only disruption of a manufacturer in China that cannot deliver, but you can also encounter pirates, for instance. So there's a shipment on its way, but there's pirates on and your shipment is delayed. Or there's an earthquake somewhere and your shipment is not coming at all, for instance. So that is in the supply chain risk variant. But we did do a mailing to all customers because that's more. The teaching case can also be used by non-customers because it's free at disposal. The risk management variant teaching the teaching materials for the interactive gameplay is something that is only available for customers. So it is available for you, Pete. It is free available for you. But then you have received a mail about that, but I can resend it to you where you can find it.
I'll check it. Yes, thank you.
Yeah. So, but yeah, that of course that's really interesting to make it interactive and to experience what it feels like if your supplier is not delivering, and then you have to of course work with dual sourcing or vendor managed inventory or things like that. So that's it's very interesting, of course. And what we can do, Pete, is if you want to try that version, then you can ask Iris to provide you with a test login for that. So I think Igor, you had one of that. I think you had a test login for that for the
yes.
for the variant risk management. Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you tried it? Have you tried it already, Igor?
Yeah. It's great because
Okay.
I can do things that usually I don't do.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Excellent. Oh, you have some technical issues due to connectivity.
No, it's only to share my experience. Here we cannot use usually Zoom with the students or Microsoft Teams, and then we use another platforms like Telegram or WhatsApp, and this is good because maybe not every country can do that, and in our experience we can use the same with other platforms or other and the case is great because you have it's real there's only watch role, but you have open things that usually you only have open in the fifth or sixth round. And the students can see from the beginning a lot of possibilities, and they can analyze more. For me, it has been great because now the 100% of my students can do that. Before, not because you have the payment, but now they can do that. And this thing is a very good idea, and the student can engage with that. It's not the problem.
Yeah, and also what we from the last webinar, we also discussed that you could use this business case, for instance, as an assignment for the students. So you could after they've played the Fresh Connection or before they play the Fresh Connection, you can use this case to do an assignment, to give them an assignment. There in the previous webinar, there was someone who said, "Oh, but now we have troubles with examination of the students." But maybe we could give them this assignment that they can work on for the next couple of weeks, and they have to deliver some materials there. Possible. That's all possible. You can have the students record something. You can also have them work on it personally. And enjoy your dinner, Pete. And here as well, yeah. But have a great weekend. Yeah, so you can also use it as an assignment as well. So yeah, there's different options there. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Corinne. Please, can you share more information about licensing and the login details that can be available to students? Because you have 3 different platforms. So are they interlinked or are they standalone individual platforms?
Yeah. Oh, you mean, wait a minute. The game.
You're talking about, you have Fresh Connection, you have Cool Connection, and you have the third one. I can't remember the name of the third one, but is there any possibility to integrate the 3 together? And what is the license agreement? And can you share further information about that?
Yeah. Well, I can tell you that everything, all our games are available through one platform, and that's my.inchange.com. And so what you would need is only just one registration, and for every game that you play, you would need a separate code. That's all. And of course, it's also possible with the students to play all 3 games. So there's a lot of possibilities there. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Does that answer your question a little bit?
That is it. Thank you.
Yeah, because we've been working really hard to make this online platform, and in the last year we rolled it out, and now it's really working perfectly. And all the courses that you give are all located or are all accessible through the platform my.inchange.com. And all the information for the students is there. Your information is there, so everything is there. Your back office is there. So if you want to calculate one of the rounds and you want to see the students, and everything is there.
So only one registration is required.
Yeah, just one registration. Yeah, also for the students. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
And if you want more detailed information about, you mentioned license agreement and how to use all the simulations in your course, then we can discuss this one-on-one with Corinne or me.
Okay, that's perfect. No, I will be interested in that.
Yeah, we'll be in touch with you about that. So that we will inform you in more detail. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Corinne.
And everything is online, eh? So everything is cloud-based. So you don't need to download any software on your computer. Students don't need to do that. The only thing is the student that they just have to register on my.inchange.com. It's very easy, and you don't have to worry about software updates or whatever. And we have a back office or a help desk that's available 24/7 because we work globally. So it's yeah, very convenient. Yeah. So if there are no other questions, yeah, of course, Tanto. Yes, of course.
That you presented today. So you said this is free of charge.
Yeah.
For the instructor as well as for the students, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So when I try to relate this case with the 4 blocks that Noah introduced, so which block is free of charge? Is that the case itself include 4 blocks that we can use, or one of the blocks is free of charge, or what?
Everything is free of charge.
Okay.
And the 4 blocks are kind of the course design. So the teaching case typically, or the layout of the execution of the business case typically is done in four parts. And you'll start with mapping. What is the supply chain mapping? So you start to map what kind of products do we have, what kind of customers, what are the warehouses, how many pallets do we have there. So you do all the mapping. And then you, of course, you go to the short-term risk, the long-term risk, and the mitigations. So it's
okay. So everything is within one case. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah.
Okay, you have to understand it this way. It's really a scenario where you are not a supply chain manager. You have a situation as it is, and you get questions, and that's the case. And then the students have to answer these questions. So that's the teaching case, and that's all for free. So that's everything that I explained now is for free. And then the interactive, the Fresh Connection course where you play rounds, that's a different different setup, and that's what we use with many professors and universities around the world. And those are paid for options, and there we have solutions depending on what your learning objectives are. Yeah.
Okay. Yes, thank you.
Yeah. So you haven't uploaded it yet, Harton, because I will share the link for you, so you can go there, and you can just you can just go to the website, register, and download it.
Okay. Yeah, I will.
Yeah, just do that. And there's 3 documents there. That's teaching notes. That's the business case, of course. First the business case, then the questions for the students, and the teacher notes. Yeah.
Okay.
So everything, it's kind of a Harvard style. Don't know if you know the Harvard style business cases, but it's kind of a Harvard style business case.
I see. Okay, good. Thank you.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah. So if you have any questions, let us know, and we'll be there. Yeah. So any other questions at this moment?
It's okay.
No questions? Okay. Then we thank you a lot for, I think on behalf also of Noah, we thank you a lot for being here. And if there's anything that you still need from us, any questions, Igor?
No, it's okay. Thank you.
Yeah? Okay.
Very satisfied.
Okay.
Yes,
all right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Please hang in, Igor.
No.
Can you say it?